One's got to be careful about jumping to conclusions, but it does seem at face value to be very damning, and I find it almost inconceivable to think of a captain of a ship leaving the ship while he knows there are a lot of people whose safety he's responsible for are still on that ship, and I find that quite remarkable, and then what seems to be refusing to get back on board there.
Is it a rule that the captain should be last to leave ship, or is it a custom or a tradition? What is it?
There's no law, but I think any captain would see that as a fundamental duty, and if you look back historically, you know, people, Captain of the Lusitania, Captain of the Titanic, washed off. Now, there may be circumstances. Once a ship starts absolutely rolling over in deep water, splits in half, things, you know, you can't do much apart from just get washed out or get out of the thing. But generally, I mean, I think it's your duty, and you know, there are worse things than dying, and you've got to do your duty, and that is to stay there.
And that goes whether you're on a military vessel, as you were, or on a merchant ship, commercial vessel. It's the same.
Absolutely, and there's a good tradition of merchant captains, you know, staying on board right till the very end and losing their lives because they did stay.
And if you're on a ship, though, a merchant vessel like the cruise line, which is listing heavily, and maybe all your communications are gone and we don't know what was going on, is there much point in staying on the bridge if you don't have a clear... Would you have had a clear idea what was going on?
Well, the captain is responsible for all the lives on board the ship, and it's his responsibility to ensure that the evacuation is started, well, the assembly process is started, and then the evacuation is started. And one of the things I can't understand in this particular incident is why it took so long to get the evacuation process started.
It was about an hour, wasn't it?
It's incredible. I mean, if we've heard from passengers who were actually knocked out of their seats at dinner by the impact, and the captain had not started at least the assembly process, which I would have thought would have been very prudent to get the passengers assembled. A ship this size, with this many passengers, it'll take at least 40 minutes under ideal conditions to get all the passengers assembled.
You've studied what happens in these circumstances, and the group mentality, I suppose, when panic overwhelms your common sense. How do people respond in these instances?
Well, a key thing is that in most situations, in emergency situations, we don't actually see panic as such. Panic is irrational behaviour which can be destructive to the self or to others. And in these sorts of emergency situations, and we've seen this time and time again, people behave in a relatively rational way given the situation that they're in.
Right.
So, for example, it's not a sign of panic if people are going to run towards the assembly stations. You would expect them to do that. That's what you'd want them to do. It's not a sign of panic for people to be crying. You know, it's if they behave in an irrational way. If they start a fist fight and pushing people over and clamouring over people, that's a sign of panic.
But it can be contagious panic, and I was in a ship that broached and went right over to 60 degrees, and all the steam safety valves lifted, and there was a fire, and we were rolling very badly. And actually it's things like the fact that people know that people are taking charge and know what they're doing, and simple little things like on the bridge, which had waves going over it, saying, right, come on, make sure you get in the log, exactly the time this has happened, do this, you chaps get in to do this, and immediately everyone just does their thing. As you say, they might do it quickly.
They know the drill.
But they do their thing, and well, even people who don't know, you know, they know that they've got to get off the thing, and they're quite good, actually, generally. That's certainly my experience of these occasions.
We've heard there was a bit of a scramble at times to get on board the lifeboats, but there's a suggestion that it's not women and children first is not necessarily the most efficient way to do things.
No, it's not. I mean, and there's no regulation that says women and children have to go first for a start, and in fact it's not very efficient. If you're in a time-critical situation like this, you don't want to start saying, okay, women please come forward. You need to get the people on as quickly as possible. And so wasting time trying to separate men and women, and then potentially having family groups which are a strong bond, and saying, all the men folk, I'm sorry, you're going to stay here, and you know, that's going to cause problems. So we don't do that. What we tend to find is that you know, the people who are first in the queue will get on, and we don't try and separate the people out.
But the captain was clearly in shock. And I think part of the reason for that is how extraordinary taking a 114,000-ton ship within half a cable of rocks. I mean, he said in his statement when he was talking, he planned to do that. That is unbelievable. I might do that in a warship in a war, or if I was going alongside, but to take a 114,000-ton ship that close to rocks anyway, I mein, he said, you know, within a cable of them, I just find quite bizarre.
Yes,
and so I think having gone wrong, that and then added the other things. Now, that in the final analysis, that's not an excuse, I believe, for leaving your ship. But clearly, the man was in absolute shock.
He was talking about coordinating the rescue effort from down below, that he was in a lifeboat.
How could you do that? I mean, that's nonsense. Nonsense.
At least, I suppose, what this will show is that proper procedures need to be put in place across all cruise ships and that everybody who gets on a cruise ship knows what they're going to be doing in case of emergency.
But that is done.
There are procedures in place. There are proper procedures in place. This boat, this ship, could have been evacuated in, you know, from the point of starting the assembly process to getting everyone off the ship. It could have been done in about an hour's time.
Right.
It's possible for this ship to do that. The evacuation didn't start quickly enough. The process wasn't managed, controlled. Where was the captain initiating the evacuation process? Where was the captain actually calling for the abandonment? In fact, from what I understand, from what we've heard from survivors, the captain didn't even initiate the abandonment process.
But I think there is an issue with these. As you're going up in ship sizes to 8,000 and things like that, I mean, yes, there are drills and things, but these things do take a lot of time with that number of people. And the other thing one always needs to remember with the sea ultimately is your enemy. It's when you think that it's benign and nice, that's when it's dangerous. I mean, it's one of the common bonds of all sailors. The greatest enemy, not another nation, it's the sea.
Even when you're very close to the shore.
The sea it'll drown you quick as a flash. It doesn't take much to do that, and it's dangerous. And so you've got to remember that all the time.